Turn with me, if you would, to Proverbs chapter 31. I'd like to read verses 10 through 31. And it says this: "It's hard to find a good wife, because she is worth more than rubies. Her husband trusts her completely. With her, he has everything that he needs. She does him good and not harm for as long as she lives. She looks for wool and flax and likes to work with her hands. She is like a trader ship, bringing food from far away. She gets up while it's still dark and prepares food for her family and feeds her servant girls. She inspects a field and buys it. With money she has earned, she plants a vineyard. She does her work with energy, and her arms are strong. She knows that what she makes is good. Her lamp burns late into the night. She makes thread with her hands and weaves her own cloth. She welcomes the poor and helps the needy. She does not worry about her family when it snows, because they have fine clothes to keep them warm. She makes coverings for herself. Her clothes are made of linen and other expensive material. Her husband is known at the city meetings where he makes decisions as one of the leaders of the land. She makes linen clothes and sells them and provides belts to the merchants. She is strong and respected by the people. She looks forward to the future with joy. She speaks wise words and teaches others to be kind. She watches over her family and never wastes her time. Her children speak well of her. Her husband also praises her, saying, 'There are many fine women, but you are better than all of them. Charm can fool you, and beauty can trick you. But a woman who respects the Lord should be praised. Give her the reward she has earned. She should be praised in public for what she has done.'" Now, Solomon is writing this in Proverbs, and he presents a picture that I don't know if a single woman could stand up to. But you also have to remember that the time period that which Solomon is writing is different. And in Solomon's day, women were not looked upon as highly as they are today. Women did not have the opportunities that they have today. And I don't want you to look at this passage of Scripture and say, well, that's an impossible standard. Nobody can meet that. But there are a few key things there that I think that we can take away. And it's found at the very end. It says, "Her children speak well of her. Her husband also praises her, saying, 'There are many fine women, but you are better than all of them. Charm can fool you, and beauty can trick you. But a woman who respects the Lord should be praised.'" And then this final verse, "Give her the reward that she has earned. She should be praised in public for what she has done." You know, in Proverbs, it says, "A woman of noble character who can find? She lacks nothing of value. She can bring him good, not harm, all the days of her life." On Mother's Day, America takes time to recognize mothers for their tireless effort that they put into raising a family. Even Solomon took some time to recognize mothers. Proverbs 31:28 says, "Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her." Today, we want to thank moms for 3 expressions of love that they show children. And so we're going to look at 3 different expressions of love that they show children. The first is this, that moms instill respect for authority. Moms instill respect for authority. In Proverbs 31:26, it says this, "She speaks wisdom, and faithfulness and faithful instruction is on her tongue." You know, instilling respect for authority is pivotal because it's easier for a child to follow God when he has learned to follow his parents. We live in a society today where I think there's less respect than I can ever remember there being. We don't treat each other with respect. And we look at, all of the outbursts, the things that have happened out in Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis and all of these other places. And I don't care who you are, you will always answer to somebody. Even if you're the President of the United States, you will always answer to somebody. And the sooner that we learn to respect others, the easier that life will be for us. And parents have a responsibility to instill respect in their children. I'm not sure what my mom did to get her bluff in, but I would have never, ever dreamed of going against what she said, because I was convinced that life would end instantly. When I was growing up, I got a lot of spankings. There's probably still calluses on my bottom, but I deserved every one of them. I remember it seemed like forever, we would come home from church and Mom would say, "Debbie, David, upstairs. Dan, drop them." And that was something that went on for a long time. But, and Mom said I was never a bad kid. I just was really busy. And she said sometimes she was convinced that I thought to myself, I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but it's worth it. But my mom I think I turned out okay, right? But a big part of that is because of the discipline that my mom instilled in me. Growing up, every family dynamic is different. In Melanie's home, Dad was the one that you feared the most. I probably shouldn't tell her. I'm going to tell the story anyway. Melanie was a little girl, and she knew that she was in trouble, and she knew that she was going to get a spanking. So she went up to her room, and she put on every single pair of underwear that she had before she came down and got her spanking. And she said it didn't matter. But she said her dad had a really hard time keeping a straight face. Right? But discipline and respect is so tremendously important. We need to make sure that we're not too permissive, because it breeds disrespect and exasperation. But on the other hand, if we're too strict, rules without relationship equates to rebellion. Fences are important. When we think about, and the rules that we make as parents, they're like fences. Fences have two purposes. They keep good things in, but they also keep bad things out. And so when we establish rules for our kids, we're doing two things. We're helping to keep good things in and to keep bad things out. One of the things that my mom shared with me and that I shared with my kids is that I don't have a problem being the bad guy. If you are ever in a situation where people are trying to talk you into doing something that you know is wrong, I told my kids, don't ever feel bad about blaming your dad. Well, I'd like to go with you, but I know if my dad found out, he would just be really mad, right? I had no problem with that. And I know that my parents had no problem with that too. If you want me to be the bad guy because I'm, telling you that you need to do what's right, great. I'm all for that, right? Because fences do two things. They keep good things in, and they keep bad things out. And, there is kind of a peace that comes with knowing where the lines are drawn, with knowing where the fences are. And, I've seen kids in certain situations that keep pushing because they want to know where the fence is. They want to know how far is too far. And because that line is never drawn, because that fence is never erected, they keep pushing, searching to find out how far is it that I can actually go. I wanted my kids to know exactly where that fence was. When we were at Marshalltown, speaking of fences, when we were at Marshalltown, Bethany was tiny. She was like 2 years old. And I put up a fence, right, so that she could play in the yard. And I don't even know if I had the last piece of fence done. And the doorbell rings, and it's her at the front door. One of the neighborhood kids had taught her to climb the fence just as soon as, it couldn't even hardly been finished. And I remember one time, I go out to look for her, and she was just gone. And parents, you know what that's like, right? When your kids are missing. My 2-year-old daughter is missing. I am looking everywhere, and I cannot find her. I have this, my stomach is just churning. And I don't know if she has run off. I don't know if she has been kidnapped. And I look down the street, and Liscombe is half the size of Alburnett, right? It's tiny. And I look down the street, and there is my 2-year-old daughter walking with a bunch of town kids, and they have gone to the edge of town. She is probably, she may be the first person, 2-year-old, that was grounded to the house for a week. I don't know. And she even had this little paper that I drew up for her. It showed this little girl crying, and every day she had to make a scribble by the day that she was grounded that was on the refrigerator, right? We do these rules because we want to protect our kids, but also we don't want to die early from stress too. There's that part of it as well. Proverbs 29:17 says, "Discipline your child, and he will give you peace. He will bring delight to your soul." And that's important for us. Secondly, moms are involved in the lives of their children. Moms are involved in the lives of their children. Proverbs 31:27 through 28 says this: "She carefully watches all that goes on in her household and does not have to bear the consequences of laziness. Her children stand and bless her. Her husband praises her." Moms are pivotal in passing the spiritual baton on to their kids because they're usually the one who spends the most time with them. The person who coined the phrase originally, "the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world," there's a lot of truth to that. Because how you influence your children will be what carries them throughout the rest of their life. Have any of you ever seen the movie 2 Weeks' Notice with Sandra Bullock? And do you remember at the end of the movie when she just can't take it anymore and she finally resigns? and she is working at that, free legal service, and he comes to her, and he makes this statement. He says, "You have become the voice that's in my head, and I can't shut it out. In fact, I don't want to." You remember when he makes that statement? You know, parents, if we've done your job correctly, you become the voice that's inside your child's head. That voice that reminds them to do right and not to do wrong. Don't ever downplay the impact that you have in influencing your kids to be like Jesus. And understand and realize that your kids are watching you. And they are judging Christianity by the way that you live your life. And not just moms, but dads too. You know, in Proverbs it says to raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. In 2 Timothy 1:5, it says this. In fact, it's a passage of scripture that Chad used earlier. "I know that you sincerely trust the Lord, for you have the faith of your mother Eunice and your grandmother Lois." Paul was speaking to Timothy, and he said, "I know that, Jesus is inside of you because I see it modeled in both your mother and your grandmother." We don't know a tremendous amount about Timothy, but it's almost as if the Apostle Paul became kind of the father that we don't ever find mentioned in the Bible that Timothy had. He encourages Timothy like a son, but he says, "I can see the influence of your mother and your grandmother on you." In Deuteronomy 6:6-7, it says, "And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are away and on a journey, when you are lying down and you are getting up again. Teach your children about Jesus. Teach them what's important. Understand that your children are being influenced in ways that we don't want them to be influenced by the rest of the world. And the time that we have to instill in them is so tremendously important. If you are a Christian, then know that when your kids are at school, they're being influenced to do non-Christian things. When they're in college, they're being influenced to have non-Christian politics and beliefs and ideologies. And the only thing that can counteract that is what they get here in church and what they get at home. And so the influence, the part that you play in determining their outcome is so tremendously important. And understand that that role doesn't end when your child turns 18. Parenting is for the long haul. Like I was talking about that passage in Proverbs, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. There are times when it seems like they're not listening to anything that we have to say. There are times that it seems like they're not taking to heart the advice that we want to give them. In the video that we showed right before the message, you noticed how it started out. The 5-year-old, my mom knows everything. And then the 8-year-old, my mom knows most everything. The 16-year-old, my mom knows nothing, right? The 23-year-old that says, well, I'm way smarter than my mom. But as they got older, the more and more that they appreciated their mom and the things that they had to teach them. And that's really true. You know, I used that video this morning because there's so much truth in it. There's so many times now that my mom and dad are gone that I wish I could talk to them. And just, you know, things that I didn't think were that important, now I wish I could just get some insight. Moms, it's important that you invest in your kids. And then thirdly, moms, trust God through those uncertain times. Moms, trust God through those uncertain times. It's possible that parents do all the right things in raising their kids, yet their children may still make wrong choices. Becca was talking just a little bit, and she was sharing that she had, was it philosophy or psychology that you just finished up? Psychology, right? The psychology classes. And she was talking about her teacher. And I remember when I had that, and I thought that all of those people in psychology were crazy. You know, Rogers and Glasser and Sigmund Freud, that guy was crazy, right? But as we looked at all of the different theories and all of the different things, the conclusion that I kind of came to myself was that, yes, we are influenced by our environment, but ultimately we make our own decisions. And that's really where I fall. You know, we are influenced by the things that go on around us, but people ultimately have the ability to make their own choices. And so we can do all of the right things, and they may still choose to make a bad decision. But the hope is that we've instilled in them the truth, and that eventually they'll come around to it. You know, kind of like Jesus, kind of like God the Father, you know, God holds out, I think, what's very best for us, what he hopes for us. And then sometimes we make bad choices. And because of that bad choice, what was very best for us is no longer on the table, right? So if I, wanted to have a career in law enforcement, I want to be a police officer, and then because I make a bad choice and I'm arrested for driving under the influence, that option may no longer be available to me. And so then I have to look at what the next best option is. You know, I think God's like that. He holds out what's very best for us, and then sometimes we make decisions that disqualify us from what his very best is, and so he holds out the next best thing for us, hoping that we'll do that, right? And parents sometimes do that too, I think. You know, good parents do that. We hold out what's very best for them. Sometimes I think our kids don't ever think we were ever young. And we made mistakes too. And because we love our kids, we don't want them to make the same mistakes we made. But sometimes the kids only learn after they touch the hot stove. You try to warn them, and if they won't listen, then you have to be there with the aloe vera lotion or whatever it is after they touch the hot stove. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think it's easier for moms to trust in things that they can't change than it is for men. Maybe that's unfair, but I think it is. I think partly because women are smarter than we are. But I think that women recognize that there are things that they can't do. And so they learn to trust when they can't. Guys, we are fixers. Well, some of us. And so the danger is for those of us that think that we can fix everything is that we're busy trying to do it all on our own. And so we don't learn to trust others because we're always trying to fix it ourselves. And I'm not sure why it is, but I think women have a better grasp of being able to realize that I can't do everything and to trust when they can't, when there are things that are outside of their control. I want you to be encouraged that raising your kids is not completely and entirely on you, but that God has a role to play in the unfolding drama that's called parenting, and that He'll be faithful. I want you to know this. Every child can appreciate parents who try to raise them correctly, who try to steer them toward the Lord. There's no higher calling than to be a parent, to raise children to follow God. Moms, we hope that you can share the happiness of John when he wrote, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth." I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Love God. Love your kids. And understand that when your child was born, they didn't give you a manual. There was no Parenting 101 book that came with your baby. And so we're all going to make mistakes. But if we're trying to follow the example of Jesus, they will too.